I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into the data center and heard pop music playing instead of the soft hum of virtualization stacks. That was clue number one. Clue number two? The laminated sign taped to the firewall rack that said, New Era Loading, in bubble letters. I'd spent 8 years keeping 18 data centers online, through ransomware storms, fiber cuts, overheating events, and one extremely memorable coffee spill disaster. And now the server room looked like someone tried to stage a YouTube thumbnail inside it. My name is Jessica Hale. I'm 39. Divorced? No kids. 2 cats. And I smoke 1 cinnamon cigar a year, only after surviving Q4 failover drills. I don't do inspirational posters. I don't do group hugs. And I definitely don't do bubble letters in critical infrastructure areas. For nearly a decade, I've been the quiet shadow behind Orion Tech, the one keeping the heartbeat steady while other people posed for magazine covers and keynote speeches. And for 8 years, no one, not the board, not the users, not even the CEO, knew that if I ever walked away, this company would stop breathing. But I wasn't thinking about any of that yet. Not fully. I was staring at the sign when a voice floated in from behind me. Cool, right? I turned, and there she was. Harper Kingston, 25, influencer, lifestyle podcaster, and the newly hired Systems Innovation Director, despite having no professional background beyond editing videos and posting aesthetically beige workspaces on Instagram. She smiled like we were girlfriends. James thought it would make the room feel less stressful, she said. Right. James. James Beaumont, the owner's son. My new boss. And the walking embodiment of the phrase, fail upwards. He'd been back exactly 7 weeks, and in those 7 weeks, he managed to rename our core architecture to Project Phoenix, replace the internal documentation wiki with slides full of emojis, and apparently hire his girlfriend into a role that previously required 10 years minimum experience and full infrastructure clearance. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. Instead, she tucked her hair behind her ear and whispered like we were talking about horoscopes, not security. I'll be honest, I don't understand half of what's happening in here, but James said you're going to teach me everything. My jaw locked. Teach her? Teach her how to prevent a cascading failure event? Teach her how to negotiate emergency vendor licensing at 3 a.m.? Teach her how to decrypt logs mid-outage while the CEO hyperventilates over your shoulder? No, absolutely not. Before I could speak, my phone buzzed. A Teams message popped up on the lock screen. James, need you in my office. Now. That smiley face wasn't friendliness. It was a warning shot disguised as politeness. I didn't rush. I finished my server checks, not because he asked, but because I knew whoever touched those racks next wouldn't know the difference between a heat warning and a system meltdown. When I finally walked into his office, James was already leaning back in his leather chair. Smug, relaxed, rehearsed. Harper followed behind me like a proud pet owner showing off a trick. He didn't acknowledge me at first, just scrolled lazily on his phone. Then, so Jess, he said, stretching the nickname like gum. We've been doing some restructuring, directional shift, new energy. That word again, energy. It was uncanny how people with the least competence loved talking about energy like it could replace skill. He continued, You've been here a long time, and honestly, I never understood why my father thought you were valuable. There it was. The first cut. You're outdated, he added. Rigid, non-collaborative, and starting today, we're replacing you. He gestured casually toward Harper. With someone who aligns with the future. Harper waved. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. Then he exhaled sharply, satisfied with himself. Effective immediately, he said, voice like cold metal. You're done here. For a moment, one quiet, razor-edged moment, the world stopped. Then I slid my laptop from my bag, placed it gently on his polished desk, and met his eyes. You have exactly 20 minutes before everything goes dark. I said calmly. Tell your father I said good luck. Harper's face twitched. Confusion, then unease. James scoffed. You're bluffing. I smiled, not wide, not dramatic, just enough to let him know I wasn't. No, James, I murmured. I'm warning you. I turned and walked out. No shouting, no tears, no panic. Just the sound of my boots on the marble floor, steady and absolute. By the time I reached the lobby, my phone was already lighting up. Admin failure warning, license sync error, access denial triggered. And then the last message. James, what did you do? Answer me. Now. I didn't respond. Because I didn't do anything. I simply stopped holding everything together. Something they never imagined I would do. Something they never believed I was capable of. Something they were about to learn the hard way. By the time I reached the parking lot, my hands weren't shaking. Not from fear, not from adrenaline, but from something colder. Recognition. For 8 years, Orion Tech treated me like infrastructure. Necessary, quiet, and replaceable only in theory. And now they were about to learn the difference between routine and reliance. The difference between background noise and a lifeline. I opened my car door, slid into the driver's seat, and waited. Not because I was hesitating, but because I knew the dominoes had just begun to fall. Right on cue, my phone buzzed. First notification. Critical alert, primary authentication token mismatch. Then, admin override attempt detected. And finally, unauthorized credential escalation. Blocked. I exhaled slowly. That was them trying to regain control. Trying and failing. Initially, the system didn't collapse. That's not how it works. It doesn't go dark instantly. It flickers first. It questions itself. It looks for the person who built the bones, the documented pathways, the emergency overrides. And when it doesn't find them, it begins shutting doors, one by one. I put the car in drive, but before moving an inch, a call flashed across my screen. Unknown number. I didn't need caller ID. I answered. Jessica, a voice said, controlled but tense. It was Marcus, head of compliance. One of the few people who understood that IT wasn't magic. It was craftsmanship. Tell me they didn't actually fire you, he said. Silence stretched between us. You're kidding, he muttered. Jesus, okay. Listen, half the dashboard just logged out. Finance can't access their Q1 ledgers. Operations lost redundancy mapping, and... A muffled voice cut him off on his end. Then another. Background chaos. Urgent, rising, panicked. Marcus came back, voice lower now. What exactly did they break? I leaned back in the seat. They didn't break anything, I said quietly. They just removed the person who knew how to run it. He cursed under his breath. Then, James is asking if there's a workaround. I almost laughed. No, I said. There's preparation, there's maintenance, there's respect for architecture, there's institutional knowledge. Workarounds don't replace those. Seconds passed before he responded. He thinks this will blow over in an hour, Marcus said. He's already talking about resetting the structure and starting fresh. Of course he was. People like James always believed everything could be rebuilt faster, cheaper, and easier, because they'd never built anything themselves. Tell him, I said, that a system is only as strong as the person who understands it. And right now, he fired the last person who does. I hung up before he could reply. Not because I was being dramatic, but because staying on the line meant becoming responsible again. And I wasn't. Not anymore. I pulled out of the parking lot and headed toward the city. 10 minutes later, another alert pinged. Failover license expired. Renewal required. That one would sting. Failovers were the backbone of the system. The seatbelt, the parachute, the safety net. They required manual renewal every 6 months because automation left too much room for error. I'd renewed every single one for 8 years. I knew, down to the day when each was set to lapse. Today, one did. Tomorrow, 3 more. By the end of next week, none of them would exist. Another notification buzzed. This time a text. Harper. Hey, sorry if today felt harsh, but we really need access. Can you send me your passcodes? I stared at the message, then locked my phone without replying. 2 minutes later, another message came, this time from James. Give us access or we'll pursue legal action. That was fast, but lawsuits can't reverse ignorance. I drove until I reached a quiet diner, a small brick place with fogged windows and the smell of burned coffee permanently soaked into the walls. I slid into a booth, ordered eggs I wasn't hungry for, and waited. Not for disaster, for acknowledgement, for understanding, because every collapse teaches a lesson. Some companies learn it too late. My phone buzzed again. This time, not a threat, not a request, but a plea. From the CTO. One sentence. Tell me you made a backup protocol. I typed slowly, deliberately. I did. 3 dots appeared immediately. He was waiting. I finished the message. But only one person knows how to activate it. A long pause. Then, you? I didn't answer. Because answers have weight, and timing defines impact. I set the phone face down on the table and finally took a bite of cold eggs. The truth was simple. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I hadn't touched a single setting. I had simply removed the one element they took for granted. Me. And now the question wasn't whether Orion Tech would collapse. It was how long it would take before someone finally said the words James refused to speak. We need her back. By the time I finished breakfast, 3 hours had passed since James fired me. 3 hours. That was all it took for Orion Tech, an 18-data center multinational infrastructure provider, to go from industry competitive to quietly burning at the edges. The alerts were coming faster now, stacked like dominoes. Licensing mismatch, redundancy failure, vendor link invalid, authorization chain broken. None of them were catastrophic in isolation. Together, they were a countdown. My phone buzzed again, this time a call from legal. I let it ring, then ring again, and again. Finally, a voicemail notification popped up. I didn't listen to it, not yet. The words would be predictable. Urgent, demanding, vaguely threatening with a layer of false professionalism. Instead, I looked out the diner window. Morning traffic crawled by. A woman walked her dog. Somewhere a delivery truck honked. Life continued in its quiet, ordinary rhythm, unaware a corporation was unraveling because one woman stopped holding it together. I paid the bill, grabbed my bag, and stepped outside. The cold air hit my face, clean, sharp, grounding. My phone buzzed again. This time, the name made me pause. Walter Beaumont, CEO, founder, James's father. He hadn't called me in years, not directly. Not since the Madrid outage in year 3, when he apologized for yelling at me after I restored a failing load cluster in under 2 hours. I let it ring twice before answering. Jessica, he said. Not warm, not cold. Controlled. Walter. Is it true? He asked. You're no longer with us? His use of words, not fired, not released, told me everything. He didn't approve. They made that decision, I said. Not me. A beat of silence. Then, I'm being told we've lost access to parts of the core system. That's correct. And that our license renewals aren't syncing. Also correct. And that the infrastructure is... He hesitated, searching for the right term. Unstable. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. That's what happens, I said slowly, when you remove the person maintaining stability. He exhaled, long and heavy. This isn't how we operate, he muttered. Decisions aren't made like this, at least not without review. There it was, a crack, not in the system, in leadership. You trusted James, I said gently, Not accusing, stating a fact. I trusted my son, he corrected. Another silence, not empty but full. Full of realization, full of consequence. Can you come back? He finally asked. There it was. The sentence the system had been waiting for. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. Walter, I said carefully, did anyone show you the operational documentation before they fired me? No. Did anyone check the renewal calendar? No. Did anyone confirm Harper's qualifications? His laugh was bitter. She once called HDMI Wi-Fi on a wire. I blinked. Hard. Then you already know the answer, I said. I need you to come back, he repeated. But this time there was weight behind it. Not command. Respect. Before I could respond, another alert flashed across my screen. Critical failure. Node 4. Midwest. Failover attempt unsuccessful. That one was serious. Node 4 handled 3 enterprise clients. Government adjacent. Losing it wasn't just bad. It was reportable. Walter heard my silence. What happened? He asked. Your son tried to restart a live cluster, I said flatly. A sharp curse slipped out on his end. Not anger at me, but at the reality. I finally spoke the truth, the one no one wanted to say aloud. Walter, I said quietly, you don't have a system problem. You have a leadership problem. A long pause. Then, soft, almost reluctant. You're right. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said the one thing I never expected. Not from him. I made a mistake. It was an apology, but it was accountability. And accountability is the first step in rebuilding anything. Systems, trust, people. Jessica, he continued, I want you in the boardroom tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. He wasn't asking. He was reinstating. But I didn't answer immediately. Because the part of me that was still human, still damaged, needed to breathe. You should know, I finally said. The system will continue to unravel until someone with knowledge intervenes. How long? He asked. 20 minutes ago, I would have said 6 hours. Now? 4, I answered. He inhaled sharply, then steady. Then I'll see you in 3. He hung up. No threats, no condescension, just resolve. I put the phone down, started the car, and pulled back onto the road. The damage wasn't finished. Neither was I. The next morning, I stood in front of the glass doors of Orion Tech headquarters. Same building, same security scanners, same cold steel letters bolted across the entrance. But everything felt different. Last time I walked out of these doors, I left as someone dismissed, someone labeled obsolete. Now I was walking back as the one person they couldn't function without. Marcus was waiting just inside the lobby. His posture said everything, wired with stress, running on adrenaline and caffeine fumes. You're here, he said. Not relief, not excitement. Recognition of inevitability. I nodded. How bad? He blew out a breath. 3 data centers offline. The European cluster is stuck in a recursive failover loop, and Harper tried to reboot the vendor interface by unplugging a rack switch. I stopped walking. She unplugged a live switch? He pinched the bridge of his nose. To quote her, energy can't flow if it's plugged into old systems. I stared at him. No words came. Because sometimes silence is the only response that respects how absurd reality has become. We walked toward the executive elevators. As we passed open work areas, the atmosphere shifted around us. Hushed, tense, heads turning, screens flickering with warning banners. One engineer mouthed, "Thank God," when he saw me. Another just raised his coffee like a salute. Nobody smiled. Nobody joked. This wasn't office gossip anymore. This was survival. When the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, the first voice I heard was panicked and unmistakable. I don't understand why it won't reset. It worked yesterday. James. He was pacing outside the boardroom, hair disheveled, tie loose, looking nothing like the polished confidence he wore when he fired me. Harper stood beside him, clutching an iced latte like it was a life raft. Her mascara was smudged, her confidence gone. The moment they saw me, both froze. James spoke first. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, though the shake in his voice softened the edge. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Walter's voice echoed from inside the boardroom. "Let her in." James looked like a child being told to sit down after breaking something expensive. Harper avoided eye contact. I stepped past them and entered the boardroom. Inside, the full senior leadership team sat around the massive oak table. Laptops open, papers scattered, screens displaying warning logs in red text. Walter stood at the head of the table. Not the calm, collected CEO I remembered, but a man who'd been awake all night confronting consequences. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. "Jessica." No title, no pleasantries, just acknowledgement. I sat. Not hurried, not hesitant. Simply present. Walter cleared his throat. "We've reviewed the situation," he said to the room, "and it's clear the instability in our system is not a technical failure, but a leadership one." James shifted in his seat, but his father didn't look at him. We removed the person who understood the architecture. We dismissed experience, loyalty, and context in favor of aesthetics. His pause wasn't accidental. It was a blade. The room stayed silent. I opened my laptop and connected to the internal diagnostics hub, one of the few tools still operational. As the system logs loaded, the room watched in tense silence. Node by node, error messages filled the screen. Expired keys, orphaned processes, conflicting permissions, failed handoffs. Finally, I turned the laptop so the board could see. "This," I said, voice steady, "is what happens when institutional knowledge is treated like a line item instead of a foundation." Someone swallowed audibly. Walter leaned forward. "Can it be fixed?" "Yes," I said, "but not instantly, and not without undoing the damage." "How long?" the CFO asked. I scanned the latest logs, then answered truthfully. 72 hours minimum for full restoration, if everything cooperates. "And if it doesn't?" the CTO asked quietly. I met his eyes. "Then you'll spend the next 6 months rebuilding from scratch while clients walk." Silence fell over the room, heavy, undeniable. Walter finally exhaled and straightened his posture. "Then Jessica will lead the recovery." James jolted upright. "No, Dad, she's doing this on purpose. She wants control." Walter turned, slow and sharp. "Control?" he said. "Control is what keeps 18 data centers from collapsing because someone thought LinkedIn leadership quotes counted as expertise." James's face flushed red. Harper looked like she wished she could disappear into the carpet. Then Walter looked back at me, not as his employee, but as the person holding the company's fate. "What do you need?" he asked. My answer was simple. Authority, access, and no interference. Walter nodded once. "Done." The board murmured agreement, but I wasn't finished. Not yet. "One more thing," I said. "All training and oversight stay with engineering, not marketing. No role titles go to anyone without qualification. And no one, no matter their last name, gets access without understanding the cost." Nobody argued this time, because the system had already punished arrogance more brutally than I ever could. Walter gave a final nod. "Then let's begin," he said. And for the first time in days, the room didn't feel panicked. It felt ready. The next 3 days blurred into one long stretch of screens, cables, conference calls, and crisis logs. I slept on the office couch, lived off vending machine crackers and burnt coffee, and barely spoke unless I needed a password or confirmation. The system fought back. Not maliciously, but mechanically. 8 years of layered configurations don't simply snap back into alignment because the right person returns. Every expired key had consequences. Every rushed fix applied by someone who didn't understand the architecture left digital bruises. Still, piece by piece, connection by connection, it stabilized. On day 1, Asia Pacific came back online. On day 2, the European failover loop broke and resynced. On day 3, the last North American node, the one Harper had unplugged, finally stopped throwing recursive authentication errors. At 2:17 a.m. on the third night, the master dashboard turned green across all regions. Not blinking, not flickering, stable. I stared at the screen for a long time, letting the quiet settle. The kind of quiet only someone who's fought technical chaos can understand. Not silence exactly, but absence of emergency. Relief with edges. A soft knock sounded behind me. Walter. He walked in slowly, like he wasn't sure I'd still be there. "You did it," he said quietly. I didn't turn immediately. My eyes stayed on the screen. "We did it," I corrected. The engineers followed every instruction. They pulled double shifts. They earned this. He nodded, accepting that. After a moment, he spoke again. Not as a CEO, but as a father. I made the mistake of assuming loyalty and skill were permanent and guaranteed, that they didn't require recognition or protection. His jaw tightened. I let my son make decisions he was never prepared to make. I looked at him then. Really looked. He wasn't angry. He was ashamed. Most people never admit that. "That mistake nearly cost the company," I said. "And cost you," he added quietly. I didn't deny it. Because being cast aside after giving years of your life isn't just professional. It's personal. He reached into his jacket and set a folder on the table. Inside was a new contract. When I opened it, 2 details stood out. Title: Chief Systems Architect. Autonomy: Independent Operational Authority. Equity: Not symbolic, meaningful. And then, non-negotiable requirement: no personnel changes affecting infrastructure roles without your written approval. It wasn't about power. It was about prevention. "One condition," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "You don't leave again without giving me warning." For the first time since this began, something softened in my chest. "I didn't leave," I replied. "I was pushed." He nodded once, slowly. "Not anymore." Silence again, but a different kind. Not tense, not uncertain, just settled. Before I could answer, the boardroom door opened and James stepped in. He looked different. Not polished, not smug. Small. "Dad said I needed to speak to you," he muttered. Walter didn't move. He stood beside me, hands clasped behind his back. James swallowed. I didn't understand what you did here," he said. "I thought if something ran, it meant anyone could run it." He wasn't wrong. That's what entitlement sounds like before reality corrects it. "I'm sorry," he continued. Not loud, not defensive, defeated. "You were never useless. I just didn't see you." That, at least, was honest. I closed the contract folder and stood. "Systems don't fail because someone inexperienced makes a mistake," I said. "They fail because no one listens to the people who know better." James nodded, eyes fixed on the floor. "I'll learn," he murmured. "Good," I replied, "but not from me." His head lifted, confusion in his expression. I wasn't angry. I wasn't cruel, just truthful. "You need to learn what it means to respect the work before you get access to the work." No one spoke after that. There was nothing left to say. I signed the contract. Walter exhaled. A long, quiet relief. James left the room silently. And I closed the laptop, not because the job was done, but because the message was understood. As I walked out of the building, not escorted, not dismissed, Marcus nodded from his desk like a soldier acknowledging another. Outside, dawn was breaking. The sky soft, muted, patient. The world hadn't changed, but everything had. And as I got into my car, I finally allowed myself one thought, the kind that settles deep and sharp. Being needed isn't power. Being respected is. And after 8 years of keeping everything running in the shadows, for the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was indispensable. And this time, they knew it. My name is Daisy Ellsworth, and until 4:12 p.m. last Friday afternoon, I was the Senior Vice President of Strategic Client Partnerships at Hartwell Dynamics, one of the largest engineering consulting firms serving aerospace, government infrastructure, and high-risk industrial manufacturing clients across North America. For 11 years, I built what executives called relationship stability architecture, the backbone of $510 million in active contracts. 41 major clients depended on my leadership, not because of a title, but because when billion-dollar projects stalled, I was the one who made things move again. I never imagined the career I built would end with a PowerPoint slide and a punchline. 3 weeks earlier, the board hired a new CEO, Michael Barrett, Harvard MBA ex-management consultant. Impressive on paper, and absolutely obsessed with one thing: cutting costs. His first executive meeting was scheduled for Friday. Mandatory attendance for all department heads and senior leadership. At 3:58 p.m., I walked into the glass-walled conference room. The atmosphere felt tense. Too many rigid shoulders, too many people staring at laptops just to avoid eye contact. Michael stood at the front of the room, hands clasped behind his back like a general about to brief his soldiers. "Let's begin," he said. The presentation title appeared on the screen: Operational Efficiency Through Compensation Optimization. Corporate language always sounds calm, clinical, neutral. But I've learned something across 11 years in high-stakes client management. Neutral words often hide destructive intentions. Michael clicked to the next slide. Our first area of concern is salary inflation. Many of our senior roles exceed benchmark expectations. He spoke as if reading a weather report. Mild annoyance, nothing emotional. Slide 3 appeared. My name, my title, my salary. $380,000, bolded. Red. The room shifted, heads turning toward me, then away, as if looking too long might make them guilty by association. Michael laughed. Not a full laugh, more a sharp exhale meant to belittle. Daisy Ellsworth, Senior Vice President, $380,000 annually, 60% above benchmark. He paused. He wanted the silence. He wanted the weight of humiliation to land. "No offense, Daisy," he added, smiling like a man performing kindness instead of offering it. "But this pay structure suggests a misunderstanding of value." I felt heat crawl up my neck. Not shame, but controlled anger. I didn't speak. Not yet. He continued, clicking to another slide showing a lower salary structure, $215,000. "A market-aligned adjustment," he said, "effective next quarter." My voice finally came. Low, calm, controlled. "Michael, why was this not discussed privately?" He tilted his head, expression empty of empathy. "Transparency fosters accountability." That sentence told me everything I needed to know. There are leaders who build, and leaders who destroy so they can feel powerful holding the rubble. I didn't defend myself. I didn't justify my work. Because humiliation disguised as policy never invites dialogue. It invites obedience. And I do not obey disrespect. The rest of the meeting blurred into meaningless corporate metrics. Cuts, restructuring, projected savings. At 4:12 p.m., the meeting ended. Executives packed their laptops with the frantic urgency of people trying not to get dragged under the same water. Nobody spoke to me. Not one person. Silence. That was the culture Michael had created in 45 minutes. I returned to my office, closed the door, sat down, and breathed. On my wall hung a framed award from a federal infrastructure client for saving a $6.4 billion aerospace grid system and preventing a national failure. But to Michael, I was a line item, an expense, a number to shrink. At 4:47 p.m., I opened a blank resignation letter. No drama, no emotion, just truth. Resignation notice. Effective immediately after today's public compensation decision and the handling of executive communication, I no longer believe Hartwell Dynamics recognizes the value of strategic client leadership. I resign effective immediately. Daisy Ellsworth, I sent it. Packed my office in 11 minutes. Walked out of the building at 5:03 p.m. without looking back. And as the elevator doors closed, an unexpected calm washed over me. Not fear, not regret. Clarity. Because in that moment, I knew something Michael did not. He didn't cut a salary. He severed the trust holding nearly half of Hartwell's revenue together. And trust is not replaceable. Not with a cheaper employee. Not with a benchmark. Friday, I left quietly. Monday, the consequences would begin. I spent the weekend in silence, not because I was unsure of my decision, but because my body needed stillness after the emotional hit and run of that meeting. Saturday morning, I made coffee, sat on my balcony overlooking Lake Michigan, and waited for something to surface. Anger, fear, guilt, doubt. None of them came. What I felt instead was relief. A quiet, steady certainty that I had walked away at exactly the right moment. But certainty doesn't erase disbelief. Several times I caught myself whispering the same question. Did he really do that? By Sunday afternoon, the question changed. What happens now? I hadn't planned revenge. I hadn't contacted a single client. I hadn't even updated my resume. But life has a way of responding when someone crosses a boundary with cruelty instead of honesty. At 9:14 p.m. Sunday night, my phone buzzed. Unknown number? I let it ring once, twice, then answered. Daisy? It's Mark Townsend, Douglas Aerospace. Douglas Aerospace represented $42 million of Hartwell's annual revenue. I had worked with Mark for 9 years, through manufacturing failures, emergency redesigns, budget crises, and political pressure inside federal defense committees. His voice wasn't angry. It was something worse. Confused and disappointed. I heard you left Hartwell, he said. Is it true? Yes. Silence. Then, why? I could have told him everything. The presentation, the humiliation, the revised salary. But I didn't. Because I wasn't going to weaponize the truth. The truth didn't need help. Leadership and values shifted, I said gently. I realized it was time to move on. He exhaled, a frustrated sigh that told me he already knew more than he was saying. Daisy, do you have a new position? Not yet. Well, he said, voice steady now. Wherever you land, call me. Douglas doesn't work with companies. We work with people, and we worked with you. That sentence lingered in the room long after the call ended. I didn't sleep much after that. Not because I was anxious, because a shift had begun. One I hadn't initiated. At 7:42 a.m., Monday morning, the real fallout started. My phone rang again. This time the caller ID wasn't an unknown number. It was a name I knew well. Ridgefield Robotics. $31 million annual contract. Then, Northgate Infrastructure. Sterling Military Systems. Blackwell Engineering. 4 calls in 2 hours. All variations of the same message. We heard you're gone. What happened? Who's handling our projects now? Are you staying in the industry? Because we want to follow you if you are. I repeated the same sentence to all of them. I cannot solicit, but if you choose differently, I respect your decision. By 11:23 a.m., 9 clients had reached out. 9. Without a single email, call, or announcement from me. At 12:06 p.m., my former colleague and friend, Leah, texted. Leah. Daisy. You need to sit down. The client portal is lighting up. Contract review requests. Audit inquiries. Renewal pauses. Someone sent a screenshot of your office being empty through the engineering Slack channels. The clients know. Like all of them. Michael is panicking. I stared at the message. Not with satisfaction, but with the heavy understanding that something irreversible had begun. Leadership often assumes loyalty belongs to logos, buildings, and corporate vision statements. But loyalty, real loyalty, belongs to trust built over years of showing up when things were hard. At 1:41 p.m., Michael finally called. I watched the phone vibrate on my table. 1 ring, 2, 3. I didn't answer. He sent a follow-up email instead. Stiff, formal, stripped of the arrogance he had displayed 3 days earlier. Subject: clarification request. Daisy, it appears your resignation has caused significant concern among several client accounts. We need to discuss transition planning and ensure continuity. Please contact me as soon as possible. Michael Barrett, Chief Executive Officer, Transition Planning. That phrase, so procedural, so dismissive, would have made me laugh if the situation weren't so predictable. He hadn't planned for the possibility that the relationships I managed weren't transferable. He assumed titles carried trust. He assumed loyalty could be reassigned. But aerospace engineers, military contracts, and industrial manufacturers don't trust easily. And when they do, they trust people, not companies, not CEOs, not cost-saving strategies. By 5:05 p.m., Monday, 9 major clients had formally paused or declined contract renewals. 46% of Hartwell's revenue was now unstable. And Michael had no idea the storm had only just begun. Because client trust doesn't disappear quietly. It leaves in waves, and Monday was only the first. By Tuesday morning, it was no longer whispers, assumptions, or quiet internal movement. It was visible, public, measurable, and it was happening faster than anyone at Hartwell Dynamics could control. I woke at 6:18 a.m. to more missed calls. 5 from clients, 2 from journalists in the manufacturing sector, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize until I listened to the voicemail. It was the chair of the Hartwell board. Her tone was clipped, controlled, and cold. Daisy, I'd like to speak to you before the situation escalates further. Before the situation escalates. It already had. At 8:03 a.m., I received a text from Leah. Emergency board meeting. Michael looks sick. No one can reach half the major accounts. They want to know if you're responsible. I stared at that last line for several seconds. Responsible? No. But necessary? Yes. At 9:20 a.m., another email came in. Forwarded from a former colleague in legal compliance. The subject line said everything. Contract termination, 30 days notice, Douglas Aerospace. Then another. Request for transition packet plus vendor reevaluation, Northgate Infrastructure. Then another. Immediate pause on active engineering scope, Sterling Military Systems. Same pattern, same reason, same implication. Hartwell hadn't just lost contracts. They had lost confidence. By noon, 9 clients had initiated formal offboarding or renegotiation processes. And Michael? He finally snapped. At 12:41 p.m., his number appeared on my phone again, this time accompanied by a message. Michael, answer. I didn't. He called again, then again. On the 4th call, I answered, not because I owed him anything, but because silence was no longer enough. His voice was different, no arrogance, no certainty, no rehearsed corporate tone. There was something else now. Panic. Daisy, we need to talk. This situation is spiraling. Clients are terminating contracts. Some are demanding you personally handle transition calls. We need to control the narrative. Control. That was always the real priority. Not respect, not leadership, not acknowledging the damage he'd caused. Control. I remained calm. Michael, I told you Friday. I resigned because I would not be publicly diminished. I haven't reached out to a single client. That doesn't matter, he snapped. They're acting like you were Hartwell. That's ridiculous. No single person carries that much weight. I let a quiet pause settle between us. He needed to hear it. He needed to sit in it. Michael, I said evenly. You believed numbers defined value. You believed that a benchmark salary justified humiliation. You forgot something essential. In industries that involve trust, memory, and crisis response, relationships are the infrastructure, not spreadsheets. He didn't respond, so I continued. You didn't cut my salary. You cut the bridge holding your clients to your company. Finally, he exhaled sharply, frustration bleeding into desperation. What would it take to bring you back? There it was. The pivot. The reversal. Just 4 days earlier, he mocked my compensation as excessive. Now he was attempting negotiation with the same person he dismissed as replaceable. I'm not interested, I said. We can review compensation, title changes, equity, reinstatement, a formal apology if necessary. Formal apology, as if dignity was a box to check. No, I said again, voice steady. I won't return to a company that waited for a financial crisis to recognize my worth. Silence. Then a low, frustrated growl in his voice. You're ruining us. No, I corrected softly. I simply stopped allowing you to ruin me. I ended the call. At 3:02 p.m., Reuters published an article. Hartwell Dynamics faces major client retention crisis. Following executive departure sources indicate 9 key accounts have halted or terminated contracts after the exit of Senior Vice President Daisy Ellsworth. Within hours, the story spread across industry newsletters, supply chain networks, and defense contracting circles. By 5:30 p.m., I received messages from 5 competing firms, all asking the same question. Are you open to discussing a leadership role? I didn't respond yet, not because I didn't know the answer, but because timing matters. And right now, the timing wasn't about opportunity. It was about truth revealing itself. By sunset, the numbers were confirmed. 46% of Hartwell Dynamics' active revenue was now classified as at risk. 1 PowerPoint slide, 1 public humiliation, 1 short-sighted decision. And the foundation Michael thought was made of contracts was actually made of trust. Trust he never built. Trust he never respected. Trust he just lost. By Wednesday morning, the calls had shifted from curiosity to urgency. Clients were no longer asking what happened. They were asking where I was going. At 8:11 a.m., I sat at my dining table, laptop open, emails flooding in faster than I could read them. Some were short and direct. We will only finalize renewal if Daisy is managing the account. Others were emotional in ways I wasn't expecting. You were the only reason we trusted Hartwell through those failures. If you're gone, that trust is gone too. In corporate environments, people like to pretend relationships are transactional, replaceable, and immune to personality. But every project crisis, every midnight call, every saved contract, those moments create something spreadsheets can't measure: loyalty. At 9:37 a.m., another email appeared. This one from a private equity firm I had interacted with years ago during a joint project review. Subject: confidential discussion request. Daisy, we are following the situation closely. If you are considering re-entering leadership in the engineering or defense supply space, we would like to discuss potential backing for a new firm. No expectations, just a conversation. Jonathan Gray, Graybridge Capital. I read the message twice. Then a third time, a new firm. The idea hit me like a quiet answer to a question I hadn't realized I was asking. Not replacement, not negotiation, not returning somewhere familiar, building something of my own. But I didn't respond yet. I needed clarity, not adrenaline. At 10:22 a.m., my phone rang again, this time from a number I knew better than almost any other. Thomas Hale, U.S. Department of Defense Infrastructure Division. His role wasn't just high level. It was decisive, strategic, the kind of position where a single comment could alter the trajectory of a corporation. Daisy, he said as soon as I answered. Tell me what happened. I explained the situation, simply, without exaggeration, and without the bitterness I could have justified. He listened. No interruptions. No sighs, just quiet attention. When I finished, he spoke with the steady authority of someone who had dealt with both war zones and boardrooms. "Well," he said, "Hartwell just made one of the most expensive mistakes I've ever witnessed." I didn't respond. I waited. "We've worked with Hartwell for 14 years, he continued. "But the truth is, we never worked with Hartwell. We worked with you. And I'm not comfortable leaving national-level projects in the hands of someone who thinks leadership is humiliation." My throat tightened. Not with emotion, but with the weight of what his words meant. "Are you joining another firm?" he asked. "I'm considering options," I replied carefully. "But I haven't committed yet." "Then don't commit until you speak to me," he said. "Because if you decide to build something of your own, you won't be starting small." When the call ended, I set my phone down and just sat there, still, grounded, processing. By early afternoon, Hartwell sent out a formal client letter attempting damage control. Leah forwarded it to me, adding a short message. "Leah, they're trying to convince everyone your departure was planned restructuring. The client responses are brutal." She wasn't exaggerating. Screenshots showed executives pushing back, some bluntly stating they no longer trusted the company's leadership. At 3:12 p.m., Michael emailed me again. Subject: urgent meeting request. "Daisy, the board would like to discuss reinstating your role with revised compensation and expanded authority. The situation is deteriorating rapidly. Please respond." Michael. The difference in tone from Friday was staggering. Confidence replaced with desperation. But reinstating me wouldn't fix what had already happened. People don't forget being told their value is negotiable. At 4:58 p.m., I finally wrote back. One sentence. "Michael, I am not returning." Daisy. Nothing more. No explanation, no softening, no apology. Because sometimes the strongest boundary is a closed door. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine and opened Jonathan Gray's email again. A question formed. Steady, deliberate, undeniable. What if the clients weren't waiting for Hartwell to recover? What if they were waiting for me to build the alternative? By nightfall, my decision was no longer a possibility. It was a direction. Hartwell wasn't just losing clients. It was losing credibility. And the industry was already looking to me for what came next. The collapse had begun. But so had something else. A beginning built from the ashes of their arrogance. 2 weeks after the meeting where Michael flashed my salary like a joke, Hartwell Dynamics was unrecognizable. The industry didn't wait quietly. It reacted. Fast, loud, and without patience for incompetence. By Monday of the second week, the story had reached every major publication in the aerospace and engineering consulting sector. Articles weren't subtle. They called it what it was. A leadership failure disguised as cost-cutting strategy. Clients withdrew faster than Hartwell's internal teams could respond. The legal department was drowning in contract terminations. Procurement teams across defense and infrastructure networks had already updated their vendor databases, marking Hartwell as high risk. No one phrased it directly, but the meaning was clear. If the person clients trusted was gone, the contracts had no anchor. By Wednesday, Hartwell's revenue had dropped 46%. Not projected, not estimated. Actual, confirmed loss. A number large enough to shake investors, analysts, and anyone who understood the fragility of trust-based industries. And then, on Thursday morning, the headline appeared. Board removes CEO Michael Barrett. Following rapid revenue collapse. I stared at my screen longer than I meant to. Not with satisfaction, but with something quieter. Accountability. Michael didn't lose his job because of me. He lost it because he never understood what leadership means. Meanwhile, my days were full. Not chaotic, not rushed. Intentional. I was in discussions with Graybridge Capital, reviewing legal frameworks, exploring potential office locations, and outlining the structure for a firm built differently. One where expertise mattered. Where people weren't disposable. Where loyalty wasn't demanded. It was earned. At 10:44 a.m. that same Thursday, I received an email from Thomas Hale at the Department of Defense. Subject: Decision made, Daisy. We have concluded our internal evaluation. The department will not renew its multi-year contract with Hartwell. We will wait for your formal company announcement and proceed through the new vendor process as soon as you are ready. We trust you. Thomas. Those 3 final words stayed with me. Not because they were flattering, but because they were the opposite of how I had been treated in that conference room. At 1:17 p.m., I met with Jonathan Gray and his team. The meeting wasn't theatrical or dramatic. It was practical, detailed, and grounded in strategy. They asked me what kind of company I wanted to build. My answer was simple. One where clients never feel like line items, and employees never become cautionary slides. Jonathan smiled and slid a folder across the table. Then let's build it. By Friday morning, exactly 14 days after I walked out of Hartwell, we signed the formation documents for my new firm, Ellsworth Strategic Systems. We didn't need a recruitment campaign. We didn't need marketing. The industry already knew. By the end of week 3, 26 former Hartwell clients had formally moved their contracts to Ellsworth Strategic Systems, totaling over $310 million in confirmed first-year revenue. 7 additional clients were finalizing approval. And then came the moment I never expected, the one that made everything quiet inside me. An email from Hartwell's interim leadership team. Subject: Request for guidance. Daisy, we would like to schedule a meeting to discuss what went wrong and how the company can rebuild trust moving forward. Your insight could help prevent similar failures in the future. Please let us know if you're open to a conversation. I read it twice, then closed my laptop. Not out of anger, but resolution. Some doors stay closed not out of bitterness, but wisdom. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to the window overlooking the city and let myself breathe, deeply, fully, without the weight of being undervalued. Because the truth was undeniable. I didn't destroy Hartwell. I didn't need to. They collapsed because they misunderstood the most fundamental rule of leadership. People are not replaceable simply because someone cheaper exists. Trust cannot be benchmarked. Respect cannot be discounted. And value cannot be measured solely in salary numbers on a screen. My departure didn't break the company. It revealed where it was already broken. And as the sun set over Chicago, orange light reflecting off skyscrapers and the lake beyond, one thought settled in my mind like a final sentence to a chapter already closed. Michael laughed at my salary. He thought I was overpaid. 2 weeks later, the industry answered for me. I was never 60% above benchmark. I was the benchmark.